By the time I was subjected to Shazam! Fury of the Gods, a dastardly mid-feature film presentation from DC and Warner Brothers, if you'd asked me to watch another DCEU movie, my response would be thus. The DCEU, or DCU, whatever, Warner Brothers universe of DC movies, seems to be in a lot of trouble, and no one seems alarmed enough. I don't mean you, the person watching this video. Anyone with a passing knowledge of popular culture could hear someone say that most people don't care about DC superhero movies, and they'd respond with,
"Say less, I know."
I mean people at the studio don't seem alarmed about the fact that 7 out of the last 8 DC movies have bombed at the box office, dating back to Birds of Prey.
Yes.
That's pre-pandemic. The only movie that didn't bomb happened to have Batman in the title. So yeah, this has been going on for a while. Not every movie they've released in the last few years has been bad, but the movies with the bigger names weren't very good, so people just decided to stop showing up for the seemingly less important. See, I have a theory. If the stories of the heroes people actually want to see aren't any good, they won't go out of their way to watch the second and third string characters. This is probably a shock to a lot of people, but Blue Beetle, Shazam, and Canary aren't A-listers.
Hello?
Most people prior to those characters' films didn't even know they existed. The MCU worked, past tense is important there, because Iron Man and Captain America were interesting and kept audiences coming back to the theater. If audiences are invested in Iron Man's story, they'll be more likely to check out supplemental things for it.
Hey, the new Ant-Man movie's out, and he'll be in the Avengers with Iron Man. Let's watch it so we know what's going on.
But the DCEU never had that. Audiences gave a shot to Ben Affleck's Batman and Cavill's Superman, but the movies they were in just weren't very good, so why would anyone care to keep up with the shared universe? Including tertiary characters like the Birds of Prey or a second go-around with the Suicide Squad, if the main character stories aren't interesting. But what about a phone app? One even a superhero could use. Today's sponsor, Babbel, is one of the top language learning apps in the world, with millions of subscriptions sold worldwide. Learning another language is something most of us want to do but don't feel like we have time for. But when I was traveling, it would have been nice to know a little Spanish instead of relying on Google Translate. ¿Dónde está el baño? Babbel teaches you real-world applications and prepares you to have practical conversations about travel, business, and relationships. And it's proven to help you start speaking a new language in as little as 3 weeks. And you can quickly switch your lessons between devices. I can use the Babbel app on my phone or switch over to my tablet or computer. Whether it's getting to the gym, learning guitar, or learning a new language, we've all had that activity we've kind of let languish. Babbel's expert-crafted lessons, immersive podcasts, and addictive games flip the script, making it easy to stick with language learning and reach your goals. Babbel has a few options to pick from, including a lifetime subscription, and you can get 60% off your subscription right now using my link. Drop a comment on my pinned one below and let me know what language you'd like to learn. By the time it was made clear Ben Affleck wasn't returning as Batman, movies were previously only failing critically but at least finding box office success. But now the DCEU was going to start experiencing financial loss after loss. Birds of Prey lost $50 million at the box office, needing $250 million to break even, and failing to meet that even with a modest budget by superhero movie standards. Wonder Woman 1984 was released during the height of COVID, so who knows what would have happened there. A normal box office weekend would have been interesting to watch audience reactions because the movie was such shit.
No, ma'am.
In 2021, The Suicide Squad was an HBO Max victim, releasing simultaneously in theaters and on streaming. It was also a sequel to a movie most people didn't particularly like or ask for a follow-up of. And at this point, you could really start to feel how disjointed the DCEU was compared to the MCU. Then in fall of 2022, you got Dwayne the Scorpion King Johnson getting his wish and his pet project, Black Adam, finally hitting theaters. And it came out to shit reviews and lukewarm box office. Audiences seem to like it okay, but man, I've never seen such a massive cope in my life. The spin on this one was absolutely hilarious to watch. You had Dwayne Johnson putting out his own PR fire by tweeting that he spoke to the head of the studio. And yes, this movie made money. Well, no, it didn't, but ignoring that, him going out of his way to do that will never not be funny to me. His movie was supposed to take the DCEU in a new direction. Dwayne Johnson swung his rock-solid dong around and got his way, and got Henry Cavill back as Superman, and they were moving forward with his vision. Then the movie performed so poorly they decided to just end all that shit, hire James Gunn, and reboot the DCU. But don't worry, the studio had promised me, the massive movie star who wields insane power, that the movie I was in did a good job. Well, I'm convinced. That leads us to the current year, one filled with empty theaters on DC opening weekends. James Gunn taking over and rebooting the DC universe was announced pretty shortly after the disappointing opening of Black Adam, leaving the 2023 slate of films to suffer the consequences of a universe that the studio just told audiences didn't matter anymore. Shazam 2 wasn't the worst thing ever, but it didn't have the charm that let the first film get away with being tropey cringe, leading a mid-movie that existed in a soon-to-be rebooted universe to die a pathetic death in theaters. And maybe the funniest thing about the horrible displays of leadership at WB is the fact that anyone thought they had a hit on their hands with The Flash. The film was a mess and has become nothing short of a meme for people who have actually seen it, which wasn't many. The movie became one of the biggest box office financial disasters of all time after several delays and reshoots ballooned the budget to astronomical proportions. Sound familiar? Well, The Flash wishes it could have made Justice League money, pulling in one of the saddest performances ever and being ridiculed across the internet. To top it off, the straight-to-streaming Batwoman movie that cost $100 million became a tax write-off because WB feared it would damage the brand, which is pretty telling when you think The Flash is a good enough movie to eat tens of millions of dollars on delays so it could see a release in theaters. I hope all the money they spent on PR because of Ezra Miller was worth losing hundreds of millions of dollars.
Did you want to fight? Is that the deal? Whoa, bro.
Damn, that one really didn't work out for him.
What is that actually happened? Of course it happened. I think this is a reflection of.
Then you have Blue Beetle, a C-list hero in limbo, as James Gunn gives no indication what it means when he says that Blue Beetle isn't the first DCU movie, but he'll be in the DCU. So is this film relevant? Will he remember this if he's integrated into a new universe? Will it be the same version? Does this one even matter? Does any of it? These questions make it easy for an audience to stay away from a cinematic world they are no longer invested in. I mean, this is what happens when you get off on the wrong foot. If you're going to have a cinematic universe work, it's got to have a good foundation. That's what's missing from the MCU right now. Imagine phase 1 through 3 of the MCU working without Iron Man 1 being so good. Well, Man of Steel was forgiven as decent enough by most, but Batman vs. Superman is where they introduced the Caped Crusader, and moviegoers rightfully threw tomatoes at that clown show. The movie opened to huge numbers, like it should have when it's the first time Batman and Superman are on screen together, but it was shat on and dismissed, plummeting to earth at the box office in short order. It made a profit, but was considered a disappointment, and for whatever profit it did make, it wouldn't make up for the long-term stain the film would have on the DC film brand.
The red capes are coming. The red capes are coming.
And it failing to crack $1 billion when Captain America Civil War, a film starring two heroes in Iron Man and Captain America who were considered B-list just 8 years prior, made $1.2 billion the same year and really reflected audiences' feelings towards Batman vs. Superman. Patty Jenkins' Wonder Woman and James Wan's Aquaman were successes, which is almost anomalous when it comes to DC. But Wonder Woman was pre-Justice League, and Aquaman rode the weirdest and perfect box office timing ever over a Christmas weekend that saw it become the DCEU's lone billion-dollar film. In between those movies was Justice League, which was just embarrassing. I remember being in the theater on opening night and one other person was there. It's like people could smell this stinker from across the room and avoided this 403. And holy Bruce Willis was their sixth sense right about this one. This movie was shit. And say what you want about the guy, and I hold no grudges against him. And by all accounts, he seems like a great person. But Zack Snyder ruined the DCU and ultimately played a hand in the decline of the superhero genre. It's true. It's kind of a meme on the channel at this point to just randomly shit on a Zack Snyder movie, but he really did do those things. Whatever you think about the Snyderverse, most people dislike it. He mishandled two of the three biggest names in the superhero genre, Batman and Superman, and fumbled the debut of a cinematic universe. It was doomed, and I mean a reboot shows that it was doomed. But the first failure might mean that the DCU will fail too, because an overload of mid to mostly bad superhero movies have made people tired of superheroes. Look, basically Snyder was the guy who kicked the rock that caused the avalanche, but he still did it.
Ding dong.
So is the DCU doomed? Well, that depends. Besides the marquee names, it's pretty safe to say the time of the billion-dollar comic book movie being a regular thing is probably over. So Warner Brothers isn't alone in this, but Hollywood needs to somehow manage to keep costs down. WB and Sony Marvel managed to make Blue Beetle in the most recent Spider-Man movies with $100 to $150 million budgets, something that's far more reasonable and where you don't need to gross $1 billion to see a profit. The success of Matt Reeves' The Batman last year shows that people aren't done with superhero movies when they're done right. But while Spider-Man and Batman movies make money, box office receipts are getting thin. Shazam! Fury of the Gods had a $125 million budget, which is reasonable, yet it still failed to see a return on investment. The best shot the DCU has is doing justice to its biggest names, so there's a lot riding on James Gunn's Superman Legacy movie. And if it's budgeted at $250 million or more, the movie, as well as the entire DC cinematic universe, is in trouble. Superman has never been a particularly popular superhero when it comes to the big screen. He's probably the most well-known superhero in the world. He's the archetype, the old standby, the one you think of when you think of a superhero. But famous doesn't make you rich, and Superman doesn't pull in the numbers that Spider-Man or Batman does. The only wild success Superman has ever had at the box office was the Christopher Reeves and Richard Donner original in the 70s. Otherwise, his films have been moderate successes to massive drop-offs like Superman 4. Superman Returns in 2006 hoped to revive the franchise, but barely broke even at the box office, and it would be 7 years before Superman would return to theaters. Specific licensing numbers are hard to come by, but The Hollywood Reporter published an article in 2014 detailing sales figures for individual superheroes. Spider-Man topped the list making $1.3 billion, and Superman trailed way behind at $277 million. Nothing to sneeze at, but that was half of what Batman was pulling in too. And this was right after Man of Steel had come out when Superman was more front and center in culture than he is now. And Aquaman 2 finally had its trailer released just a couple months before it hits theaters, no less, and the lack of Amber Heard was the only thing really noteworthy. The Aquaman and Flash situations just make the whole thing that much more confusing. Momoa's Aquaman showed up at the end of Flash in a cringy scene that existed to tell the audience,
Hey, we're rebooting, but you like this guy as Aquaman, so he's staying. And Ezra Miller as Barry Allen? Yeah, he's staying too. Well, maybe.
It's all very confusing, and this absolute mess that WB has created might have doomed their fishy sequel. The reshoots and Amber Heard drama notwithstanding, the confusion built by the semi-half-hearted reboot has created an ambivalence toward the aquatic sequel. And will they or won't they recast Wonder Woman? At one point, it looked like they were going to keep everyone but Kevin Affleck, which sent the internet into an uproar, but it looks like Gal Gadot will be joining Henry and Ben in superhero retirement. The situation with Batman is its own beast. Batman is DC. Without him, there wouldn't be a brand. They spread this dude so thin, in the last 12 months, 3 different versions of the character have been on the silver screen. That's how much they rely on this guy. If the DCU has any shot, they've got to get this character right. Fans are accepting of different versions of Bruce Wayne, but it's hard to see WB attaining their ultimate goal of 2 separate billion-dollar cinematic Batman universes at the same time. The Robert Pattinson trilogy they're planning, as well as a version of the DC Cinematic Universe Batman, good luck with that. Besides the uphill battles DC's facing on the individual character level, there's also the final boss, superhero fatigue. Bad writing fatigue, bad movie fatigue, however you want to describe it, people don't like bad product and the market will work itself out eventually. Marvel and DC have clogged the cinematic arteries of moviegoers for almost 2 decades. And while that isn't enough to stop someone from going to a movie, clogged arteries certainly aren't enough to stop McDonald's from making money. Eventually, people get sick of it and want something new to clog their arteries. Maybe it's video game adaptations. Maybe general action flicks make a comeback, but the heyday of superhero movies has gone by. Feed people enough of the same thing and they'll move on eventually. But you can't say it hasn't been a hell of a run. The MCU and DCU are both on downward trends and they've gotten there in different ways. But both IPs are contributing to the fall of the superhero genre as a cultural phenomenon, after spending years helping build it up to what it was. A lot of these franchises would have some goodwill thrown their way if they were just given time to rest, time for people to forget about them, to remember them, and to think of them fondly. But intellectual properties are the pillars of major studios now, where massive amounts of money are injected, and so studios have to keep churning out these projects to stay relevant. The ironic thing is, the more they pump out, the more irrelevant they become. Not a lot of people got to see it because it was, shocker, demonetized, so I've included a condensed version of my Shazam! Fury of the Gods review in this video. A lot of what I had to say is relevant to the discussion here, so if you didn't get a chance to catch it when I released it back in March, enjoy.
It's all about
Family! Family!
Oh damn, no one showed up. Just like no one showed up to the theater. And for good reason. Shazam! Fury of the Gods isn't worth your time. The movie is so by the numbers, bland, and pointless that I didn't even know if it was going to be worth doing a review. Anyone I know who's seen it has had the same reaction. Well, that movie exists. I mean, look at the excitement on Charlie's face.
Today we're taking a look at the new Shazam movie, Shazam! Fury of the Gods. I mean, it's not great. I mean, it's not horrible, but it's not very good. I don't know what to tell you.
The film has no reason to exist other than Warner Brothers' need to put out content. While the first Shazam was a pleasant surprise when it was released a few years ago, its sequel feels like nothing more than an afterthought in every respect. From the way it was marketed, being thrown around like a hot potato that the studio didn't want to handle, to its utterly generic story, there isn't any heart in this one despite the character's constant reassurance to the audience that there is. It's hard to even break this movie down because all things considered, it's competently made. A generic story doesn't mean bad, it's just fucking average. It's boring. When the reviews dropped, I was surprised, and the first 15 minutes or so of the movie was charming enough, but then the rest of the movie didn't really hold that pace. The acting from most of the cast is fine, besides Lucy Liu, who's phoning it right the hell in. The effects are pretty standard, and shit, I'll say they're a huge step up over anything Marvel's put out recently. But I can't remember the last time I left the theater after seeing a completely okay movie thinking sweet Jeebus it was over. What's the plot, you ask? Not that it matters, but basically, orphan boy Billy Batson, aka Shazam, even though he doesn't know his name is Shazam yet, is attempting to keep his team of other orphan Shazams together as a cohesive unit, but he's got abandonment issues and imposter syndrome. Then a group of gods who are pissed off that children have the power of Shazam show up to steal the power back. When I told you it's as generic as it gets, you can kind of figure out the rest of the story, including its conclusion, without too much trouble. That's part of the problem. This film feels like it belongs in the mid-2000s slot of superhero films. If you've somehow avoided any superhero movie in the past 20 years, you'll enjoy seeing the good guy fight a CGI mess of a monster. If you're like the rest of us, seeing the same thing for the millionth time isn't super enticing. The story also has to depower all trillion members of the Shazam family because they're basically the exact same hero multiplied. It makes the lead hero redundant and pointless. So what's the solution? Remove everyone else's abilities so he's the only one left. It feels like no one really wanted this film, and considering how much the movie bounced around the release schedule, the studio didn't even know what to do with it. Because the movie's so bland overall, it's tiresome to even point out issues with it, but some other things are worth mentioning. Like the main character, Billy Batson / Shazam. The filmmakers clearly understood that no one is actually interested in the teenage side of the character, so most of the time we're stuck with Zachary Levi's Shazam instead of Asher Angel's Billy. The odd thing is, when the character is Billy, he's far more mature than when he's a full-grown adult as Shazam. It's when he's in his superhero form that he becomes incredibly immature. This permeates through the entire cast of Shazamanites except for Freddy, with both actors who are playing the dual role having a pretty good through line of immaturity that seems completely appropriate for the character. In fact, the film seems to want Freddy to be the main character for the majority of the movie, but we're stuck with Zach Levi's Shazam out of what feels like obligation. The big bang for your buck with Shazam 2 is the poorly kept secret of Gal Gadot cameoing as Wonder Woman. The underage Billy Batson is on a date with Wonder Woman, played by an actress in her late 30s. In Freddy, Billy's even younger and hobbled counterpart, is King Riz when it comes to a 3,000-year-old woman. The film's become a beautiful disaster for WB and DC, with an abysmal $30.5 million opening weekend haul. The real-life debacle surrounding this film's release has been way more entertaining than the movie itself. Watching the lead actor Zachary Levi cope so hard on Twitter has tickled my funny bone. Calling fans toxic because a random Twitter user said the wrong thing on the wrong day toward him daring to suggest James Gunn seems to have no plans for Shazam. A severely butthurt Levi responded with an epic,
"Nuh-uh, you toxic hater,"
and followed that up a few days later by saying he's moving on from DC. You cannot make this shit up. But hey, as a side note, at least he likes to shit on toxic Snyder fans as much as I do. Hail your Lord and Savior, Snyder cultists.
What is Zack Snyder known for? People would think I was known for slow motion. I like slow motion. I don't really like slow motion that much. I don't really like slow motion that much. I don't really like slow motion that much.
Is this a film that deserves to flop? I'm not so sure, because it's not She-Hulk level bad, it's not Thor Love and Thunder level bad, and it's definitely not Justice League level bad. It just exists, and maybe our collective tolerance is too high and its mere existence is simply too much. See you in the next one. GG's, gents.